Alright, we are back here at Lantern Insights, showcasing kind of one of our hardest matchups in Modern, where we come across the 4-color kind of value pile, Teferi, Renin 6, Omnath, 4-color Leyline Binding 2, so technically 5-color, but all of that. It is one of our hardest matchups in Modern, and it is one that we were kind of taking into consideration when we built this list, kind of finding a way to be a bit more powerful against these grindier matchups. Obviously, this hand is beautiful here. Glimmer Void is probably going to mean we're delayed cracking our Mishra's Bauble, as we don't want to just have one Codex Shredder on the battlefield. A bit too risky, but still overall a very strong hand. And they are going to lead on a Delighted Halfling. Importantly, they did play the Temple Garden first, which means they are likely to be a 4-color Omnath pile and not Yawgmoth. So we can, right off the bat from turn 1, we kind of know what we're playing against. We do draw Darkslick Shores, which is very good here. It means we don't have to expose our Glimmer Void and still gives us access to everything we want to play. We'll also be able to use our Bauble in order to change our top decks here. Unfortunately, they have a turn 2 Teferi here. Teferi is very strong against our deck just for its repeatable downtick ability. Usually we'll just have to Pithing Needle it, and when it comes down so quickly like this, very, very strong. Here, unfortunately, we draw a Cursed Totem. This is one downside to some of our single targets, singleton targets, that in matchups where they're not really relevant, they're significantly worse than a lot of things we could draw, but not a huge deal to worry about. Unfortunately, what is a deal to worry about is them going back-to-back Teferis here, where I guess it takes them a little bit to figure out how they were going to tap for it, but they do play a second Teferi here, and this is able to bounce our Urza Saga, which just puts us very behind tempo-wise. We are going to mill the Ren, unfortunately, into a Prismatic Ending, and because our hand, though, is pretty redundant here, I like to let them have the Prismatic Ending, and they are going to fire it off on Lantern. I think Lantern, in general, you can make the argument which it's more correct to remove, but I think Lantern is usually the correct one to remove because we play fewer copies of it than our Mill Rocks, especially with a Whir on top. I guess they know we kind of eventually can get anything. The reason we cracked the bubble there is because we wanted the extra card, and didn't mean a big deal about who we looked at, because we wanted to draw that Whir of Invention anyway, Whir being one of the cards that can be more powerful in a matchup like this. Importantly, however, Teferi does shut down our ability to Whir at instant speed, which is one of our main advantages of it. However, it still offers a lot of flexibility. And so we are going to run out Double Shredder here, try to mill this Omnath. Omnath is one of the main ways that this deck is able to kill us going around Ensnaring Bridge, and so we don't want them to have that. Unfortunately, here they are going to play an Elish Norn, and I think at this point we are, it really depends on what those 3 cards in hand are. You may notice we haven't suspended the Profane Tutor. If it comes off suspend with a Teferi on the battlefield, it will just stay in exile. You're not able to cast it. So because their Teferi came down so early, I'm just never going to spend mana on it unless I need to get it out of my hand for Ensnaring Bridge. And in this situation, obviously having a discard spell would be much stronger than Cursed Totems, especially as their main removal spell, Leyline Binding, that they play is going to be extra powerful with this Elish Norn on the battlefield. However, in this situation, it really depends on what they have on top. Like if their 3 cards were less relevant here, as we see they already have had a lot of very strong cards. If it was just Solitudes and cards like that in hand, I think we could actually have a pretty good shot at winning this game. Unfortunately for us, we'll see they do have 1 binding, which is going to take out our Double Shredder. Teferi, because they take out our Double Shredder, it does mean that we're not able to get Needle with this Saga. We are just going to make it a blocker. We weren't doing anything else at this point, and we do get a second Shredder here. This deck doesn't tend to play a ton of counterspells main deck, so if they are bouncing bridge. They don't have enough pressure on us totally yet that we won't have time to deploy it, and hopefully in that time we can find either another bridge or a needle for Teferi. So we do go grab that shredder, and then importantly we want to use our floating mana. So and with Teferi out, we're going to tap the construct, just get an ensnaring bridge. They are likely to bounce it with Teferi, but that's less of a problem here. Unfortunately, they have a second Leyline Binding, which is going to remove 2 more things. We elect to just concede here. They're going to be able to take Bridge and Lantern, or Bridge and a Construct. The Construct's going to shrink. They're probably taking something like Bridge and Lantern, and then Teferi will bounce the Construct, and we're in a lot of trouble here. I don't really think there's a world where we get back from this. Kind of unfortunate that in this game 1 they started with double Leyline Bindings in hand with Elesh Norn. Obviously our deck doesn't have too many ways of interacting with Elesh Norn, but it is what it is. In terms of our sideboarding for this deck, things like Torpor Orb are in, Ashiok's we're going to bring in, Needles, because they have Planeswalkers. We didn't see the One Ring, but I think it's very likely that they have it somewhere in their 75. It's definitely a common card and one you should expect from this matchup. Generally, when you're sideboarding, I think you should sideboard, unless you know definitively that your opponent isn't playing something. Like take this game, for example. We didn't see the ring, and I don't know this player. I have no idea what their deck list is like, but it's reasonable to assume that the One Ring is in their deck somewhere, so I think we should bring in Pithing Needle. Some people might go, oh, I didn't see it. Maybe this list isn't playing it. Often, you just don't see a card in one game, so that's not... I think it would be incorrect to not bring in Pithing Needle in this situation. For our game 2, importantly, one thing that we look to bring out is the Profane Tutor. They're just extremely bad into Teferi. If we're investing mana, suspending them, and then Teferi for free, they get to blank our tutor and bounce something of ours. Just too slow here, not what we want to be doing. This opening hand, I think for this matchup is very solid. We have Urza's Saga, can hopefully create some construct pressure. Get Lost is a good answer to a lot of what they're trying to do. Importantly, it is one of our main removal spells for Leyline Binding that I'm playing in this list, as I don't have access to Assassin's Trophy just with the color requirements. I could play it, but I think it's a bit too... I don't really want to be playing green, and just with only the rainbow lands can be a touch inconsistent. I think Get Lost is a pretty reasonable alternative to that. Of course, we're going to lead on the Spire. Double Needles here are quite relevant. Teferi, importantly, is the most important original needle target. The second needle target has a bit more flexibility depending on what you see. And in a matchup like this, I think it's almost always incorrect to name fetch lands, not something that is really going to win you the game because they have so many other needle targets. So we are fortunate enough to draw some hand disruption here, which I think is quite strong. We do see they were playing the ring. We are correct about that. Leyline Binding, Teferi. Teferi we have the answer to. Leyline Binding we have an answer to. So Omnath is kind of the only thing we're really worried, but it is definitely going to be much slower this game. We take the Chalice here as our deck basically most of our deck is 1 mana, so Chalice is a very good card against us. If you're playing against Lantern, definitely be worried about Chalice. So we are going to needle the ring here. We see it in their hand and just don't want them to be drawing cards off it, as it is a very intensive card advantage engine and is definitely very good against us. It's basically impossible for our deck to keep up with the card advantage of it, and it gets to a point where we can't control the cards that they're drawing from it, and they will just find our way out of the lock very easily. Now here they do go ahead and Leyline Binding a Pithing Needle. I will say in this situation it's actually not terrible if they play Teferi here and bounce the Saga, as it means we'll actually get 3 constructs out of Saga instead of 2, because we'll be able to make one in response to them down ticking. We'll then be able to kill the Teferi because they didn't have any Solitudes in hand that we saw. And if they elect to pitch something like Omnath to Teferi, or to Solitude, I think we're pretty pretty happy with that exchange. And importantly, if we in the future, if we need to bring back Pithing Needle, we do have the removal spell for their Leyline Binding. They're going to play their land that they knew about, that we knew about, and play Teferi. They're going to bounce the Saga, but like I talked about, we're able to make a pretty good-sized construct here. Obviously, we're going to play the Saga, try to keep making more, and we're going to kill the Teferi. Everything going to plan here. We still have a removal spell for something like Omnath if they elect to play it, and Whir of Invention is going to be some added late game pressure, as we're going to be able to get Saga plus Shredder in a couple turns. And so here, because they play Teferi and we really want this Saga to be able to make constructs for us, we don't want them to bounce it again, we're actually going to get lost the Needle, just naming Teferi here, meaning they're essentially taking their entire turn off to play Teferi. We're going to be able to make another construct and get in pretty significantly. We draw Pixis here, which does mean that we're going to be able to assemble a much more solid lock quickly, as Saga can get one piece of the combo and Whir can get a second mill rock. Importantly here, we do still kill the Teferi, as we do know they have answers to Pithing Needle, and we do want to be able to Whir at instant speed in the future. It's just more powerful. Also, equally importantly, kind of skipped through that quickly, but we do see that they have we'll use Mishra's Bauble to see that they have Boseiju on top, and are going to exile it with Pixis because we don't want them to draw Boseiju. You could hold it for eventually finding a Codex Shredder, but I think in this position, we often talk about using Bauble on yourself with a mill rock, but I think in this position we are ahead. We're ahead on board. We have the constructs. We're definitely the ones pushing the pace. We have the pieces we need between the Saga Tutor and Whir of Invention in hand, so it's less important for us digging for things. And because our opponent's deck is one that has a ton of answers, I think it's very, very reasonable to bauble them here. And we are fortunate that we did, because we are able to get a Boseiju out of them. And they concede here. I guess they didn't hit the fourth land. As we saw in their hand, they were very kind of 4-drop intensive. They had the ring, Omnath. Importantly here, we are going to be able to swing for lethal next turn. We're going to make one construct, which will make them both 5/5s able to attack. We'll untap, make a construct 6/6s, and then go search for something off Saga. So we will have lethal next turn if they don't have any way of interacting with us, which it seems like they don't. In this matchup, obviously, like this game, things went well for us. Get Lost was pretty strong. I think I'm liking that card as in the sideboard slot that it takes up. It's been very, very efficient for me. And Whir of Invention, obviously we didn't see it here, but I think sometimes the power of these cards is that we have it as an option if our kind of other plan doesn't go as well, where I think Whir of Invention has much better like late game potential, but we're able to kill them before we get to the late game. So it's not like you might look and say, oh, Whir was just in your hand when you died, like it was useless, but no, like Whir would allow us to win this game if they found answers to our constructs, which I think is a big advantage of playing it. As we get into game 3, I like to mulligan this hand. Yes, it has double Pithing Needles, but the 2 Codex Shredders on themselves don't really do much. They're not super useful. We don't have any baubles, lanterns, anything like that. If one of these lands was Urza Saga, I think I likely keep this hand, as we're able to apply pressure and have the needles to shut down things like Teferi. As it is, because we have like we have much better hands that we can get with this, and I think this is a mulligan. It is close. I could see maybe keeping. I just don't love the double Shredder without kind of anything to go with them, as they're not a super strong card on their own. Unfortunately, our first mulligan sends us into a 0-lander, obviously totally unkeepable. And our multi-5, again, 0-lander with a bunch of sideboard cards, but still they're all like 3 mana. We kind of have to go land. So unfortunately, we have to mulligan down to 4, and this just isn't really a matchup where you can mulligan to 4 and really be ahead. I think there could have been an argument to keep bridge, but I think like when we're on a multi 4, getting the whole lock and things assembled is going to be very difficult, near impossible here. Ran 6 obviously will be a problem late game, but something to worry about then. We do see a pithing needle on top, which we do elect to keep. I think if we're trying to make constructs, playing 2 artifacts next turn, and locking down a lot of their main answers to that is kind of the way to go. It is a bit unfortunate that we are struggling to find a third land here, as we really need to rip a third one. We do need, again, Needle Teferi in the One Ring. I think those are our number 1 and number 2 Needle targets in this matchup. Ren is mainly just going to be recurring fetch lands. If they do happen to have they usually only play like 1 or 2 Boseiju, probably 1, as they need a lot of colors. And yes, looping it with Ren is good, but that's not what this deck is, like what the opponent's deck is entirely built around. So they're mainly going to be recurring fetches. They do have a prismatic ending. Importantly, they are targeting our Needle on the One Ring, suggesting that they have a One Ring in hand and not a Teferi, which is obviously it's not going to be good if they're able to draw a ton of cards with it. And this Ren we are going to have to kill at some point, because their emblem will just let them recur prismatic endings over and over. Unfortunately, we draw an Inquisition of Kozilek here. We really needed a land to have any sort of shot. At this rate, we're basically just dead here. Our Saga's going to go away. They do counter it, but very, very unfortunate multi-4 here. I'll skip through it. We actually just concede here. We know they have a ring in hand. We're going to be losing our Saga. I don't think there's any world where we win this game on a multi-4. You know, you can yell at me for an early concession if you want, but the fact that they were using a Dovin's Veto to protect their 5 cards in hand, like there's no shot that this hand gets there at all. A bit unfortunate. I think game 2 really highlighted what we were trying to do. Even game 1 I think was very close. The strengths of this build I think were shown. Obviously Profane Tutor isn't good into Teferi, and double Leyline Binding with Elish Norn is going to be very strong against us no matter what build of Lantern you're on. So I'm still quite happy with this deck. Going to keep making a few kind of minor sideboard changes here and there that I'll probably talk about in a future video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one, kind of showcasing us fighting against traditionally one of our worst matchups in the metagame. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.